The female role in film has had such a checkered past, but I think the best place to start is the 1970s. Not that that was the beginning of film at all, but it was when the female role in film began to be analyzed. In 1974, Molly Haskell, a major feminist film critic, wrote the analysis on women in film that stood true into the 21st century. Haskell points out that the influx of women in film could be a compensation for, quote, all the dominated universes from which she has been excluded, unquote. She also says that, although it is nice to see so many women on screen, their character depth was lacking in every department. She said that the female role in film was so simplistic you could categorize it into two distinctive categories. Molly Haskell says there are two types of women in film. First, there's the extraordinary woman, who portrays a strong, powerful figure. She's usually pretty good at kicking ass, but normally lacks character depth and backstory. And then there is the ordinary woman. She is commonly created to be passive and is only useful in death as a storytelling tool to ignite the male rage of the lead protagonist. And I know I'm not supposed to say this, but that is pretty up. Women in film were overdue for an upgrade. And so the 2000s gave way to the ordinary woman to extraordinary woman. These films did little to change the way women were perceived in film, but they changed the overall core values of the art by showing that women can actually have character development. Who would have thought? Although this is a great step forward for all women, was it really for all women, or just white women? And if so, then what happens to the women of color? We continue to be stereotyped, pigeonholed into roles such as the sidekick, the best friend, and the sassy black character who's only there to provide comical relief. A study released in 2012 by USC's Annenberg School for Communication and Journalism provides some statistics to put this into perspective. Examining 500 top-grossing films released in the U.S. from 2007 to 2012, the study considers some 20,000 characters and finds diversity is sorely lacking. Across 100 top-grossing films of 2012, only 10.8% of speaking female characters are black, 4.2% are Hispanic, and 5% are Asian, while just over 3/4 of all speaking female characters are white. Those representation rates don't correlate with who's buying tickets. As a point of comparison, a full 44% of movie tickets sold domestically were purchased in 2012 by non-Caucasians. 26% of tickets were sold to Hispanics, 11% to African Americans, and 7% to people from other ethnicities. Using these percentages, Hispanics are the most underrepresented groups on screen. Among other conclusions reached, Hispanic females are more likely to be depicted in sexy attire and partially naked than black or white females, and Asian females are far less likely to be sexualized. Behind the camera, diversity is even more lacking, with the ratio of over 16 non-black directors working to every black director. Only 2% of women directors among the 500 films are considered. That doesn't surprise Ava DuVernay, the first black female to win Best Director at Sundance last year for her feature Middle of Nowhere. I pretty much know us all personally. Moreover, while many conversations in the mainstream media suggest that women of color are a monolithic entity, it is important to note that women of color are a diverse group with a variety of experiences. African American screenwriter Shonda Rhimes says that White privilege is never knowing what it feels like to want to escape into a world of fantasy, only to be told through its characters that you and your people of color, like you, do not exist, even in the furthest stretches of the imagination. She says it is not the job of the majority to tell the minority what they are, it is only their job to ask. So what do I, a woman of color, actually want to see? What I want to see is young girls of color with positive character development, young girls of color with negative character development, young girls of color who are strong and loud and passionate, young girls of color who are quiet and petite and soft. I want to see young girls of color who are transgender, young girls of color who are confused and maybe a little unsure. I want to see young girls of color who are gay, straight, asexual, and aromantic. I want to see young girls of color exploring their sexuality in an environment where it's safe for them to do that. I want to see young girls of color who are masculine, young girls of color who are overwhelmingly feminine but aren't in the slightest bit ashamed of it. Young girls of color who are scared, young girls of color who are fearless, sporty colored girls, funny colored girls, smart colored girls, neurotic colored girls, young girls of color whose dialect reflect the environment they grew up in, young girls of color who grow up to be women, and young girls of color who don't actually grow up at all. Young girls of color with vibrant colored hair who won't be labeled as trashy for wanting to experiment with their bodies. Young girls of color who are relatable, and young girls of color who are not. I want to see young girls of color with eclectic character depth. Beverly clearly once said, "If you don't see the book you want to read on the shelf, write it yourself." So all I can hope is that other young girls of color are not deterred by the massive amounts of obstacles in their way, and still want to create a fantasy world where it's okay for them to matter, in hopes that one day their diversity will become what it was always meant to be. Normality.